Well, welcome to another Monday Masterclass. This time we're going to talk about high stakes projects. Have you ever been on one of these projects where, there's a lot at stake, it sounds really, really risky. It's not maybe so much down in the core here, familiar markets and technology. Maybe you're over here, you're going to try some brand new technology in a familiar market, or heaven forbid, you're going into an unfamiliar market, which is a little scarier. And then this is sometimes called the suicide quadrant. It's where people go to, end their careers because the projects usually die an ignoble death at that point. But what Scott and I are going to cover with you today is a different approach. Rather than thinking about these as risky, we'd like to look at them in a different way entirely. So what I'd like to do is just share a few thoughts with you first on the difference between risk and uncertainty. And that's going to be a really helpful thing, I think, when we talk to management. Then I'll show you really briefly the Minesweeper de-risking methodology. We had a whole nother Monday Masterclass devoted to that. You could dive in more detail, and I'll show you how to get more information on that. So I don't want to spend too much time on the how-to, but then I'd like to close up more on how we communicate with management. When we put this methodology together, we said, well, this will be really great because this is going to help teams manage their projects well. And that was true. But the other half of the benefit, I think, is just simply helping us communicate more effectively to management, getting more management patience. So I want to focus a little bit more on that. So again, flag me down. Let me know if you've got questions. Maybe you've got some war stories, maybe some scars from some big projects you've been on before that didn't go well when you had to present to management. So here's what we know for some research that was published in the Harvard Business Review. It's very typical for companies to put most of their R&D resources into their core, a little bit into adjacent, and a tiny bit into transformational. Actually, the author said that's not bad. They actually thought that was a pretty good mix. But here's what was interesting. When the best companies were examined, well, they found that the real financial benefit wasn't coming from the core, it was coming from transformational. And that puzzled me because I remember when I worked in industry, in the chemical industry, we would have these great hope projects. And believe me, they weren't the things that were transforming our bottom line. Usually we kind of limped away on those things. So one of the companies that was included in the great success companies was Google. So here, Astro Teller, the head of Google X, he was quoted as saying in a TED talk, "We spend most of our time trying to prove we're wrong. We run at all the hardest parts of the problem first. We cheer, hey, how are we going to kill our project today?" And I got to tell you, when I was running projects, I don't ever remember starting our team meetings with that cheer. In fact, if there was bad news, we tried to ignore it or kick the can down the road. So when we look back at failed projects, though, what we find is most people, they will say there were some landmines, and usually the team members agree on what those landmines were that blew up budget, schedules, the whole reputation, And they usually will say, if you ask them, yeah, we really could have detected those earlier. There's no reason we couldn't have. Either we didn't want to look there, or we thought there were problems, but we didn't want to, be the messenger that gets the arrows. For whatever reason, they delayed. And so what we want to do is see about spotting those much earlier. In fact, instead of just waiting and seeing the landmines in a postmortem, what if we could see them in a premortem? In other words, wouldn't it be nice if we could see these projects, and if we ran into a landmine, either redirect the project or kill it as fast as possible? And that's the methodology that we want to go at with this. Now, we have a methodology called Minesweeper de-risking. There is a quick start card, and let me show you where you can get this if you want it. Scott and I were talking about this morning. We're pretty sure this is true. For those of you who are in the Blueprinting Center on a regular basis, if you're already subscribing to Blueprinting, you should have a Launch Start tab up here and a Minesweeper tab up here. If you click the Minesweeper tab, if you haven't subscribed to Minesweeper software, well, you won't be able to get at the software here, but you should be able to get everything else. And you could download that quick start card whenever you want. We're pretty sure this is true. If it's not, just drop us an email. We'll be glad to send you this de-risking quick start card. So the card, let me just show you what it looks like. And I'm not going to actually go through this process with you today because, as I say, we had another Monday master class on that. And I want to focus more on the interaction between the team and management than all the how-to nitty-gritty. But basically, this is a 7-step process. You brainstorm the assumptions first, and all the assumptions that must be true for your project to succeed. And we find it's helpful to put them into 3 buckets. What are the market dynamic assumptions? The market's at least this big, it's growing at least that fast. There's no competitor that can block our entry. We can meet industry standards. And then we put in the purple, we put in our internal capabilities. Yes, we have a sales team that can reach the market. Yes, we can scale up, yada, yada. And then we put in blue all of the customer outcomes that we must meet. Some are required, some are desired. Customers must continue to use the same operating procedures and equipment. Customers would like to see faster line speed. So those are the sort of outcomes we brainstorm. Then often what's difficult for a team is to get at all of the outcomes. So we have something called a consumption chain. We say, now, how would customers even find our product? How would they order it? How would they pay for it? How would they receive it, store it, install it, all the way to end of life? And when you do a consumption chain, and that's what these red and white squares are, or rectangles down here, they help you think of new requirements, new customer outcomes. So the first 2 steps are all about generating assumptions. It's diverging. Then what we do is we have the individuals on the team go out to a website and they individually rate impact and certainty. What's the impact of this if the market isn't big enough? What's our certainty that it is big enough? And they would rate all of those, okay? Then the team gets together again. The first 2 steps, by the way, where the team is meeting either physically or on a web conference. And then the team meets again for number 4. And the little histogram over on the left here, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. The little histogram over on the left that shows the number of individual votes. And then the team resolves it into one of these 5. For impact, somewhere between irrelevant and essential. And for certainty, somewhere between certain and unknown. And when they do that, it fills in the appropriate square on the certainty matrix, with impact and certainty. So that's the group rating that the team comes up with. Then the team reviews all of the certainty matrices to make sure that they agree with these. There's actually going to be 6 certainty matrices, 1 for market dynamics, 1 for internal capabilities, 1 for desired and 1 for required outcomes. Are we sure customers want this? And then over here, required and desired solutions. Are we sure we can satisfy them? So it ends up being 6. Now, if you're down here in the red, that means it's in the danger zone. It was high impact and low certainty, so we better investigate those. Now, if we investigate those, maybe we move them up with a little more certainty and they get in the yellow caution zone. And what we want to do is get everything up in the green safe zone. So either it's not relevant or we're really certain. So that's the whole methodology, is to drive out uncertainty on all the assumptions that matter. Last 2 steps, we create a checkpoint plan. So people on the team, they take responsibility. They say, oh, I'm going to go ahead and check out that assumption. And I should have that done by such and such date. So maybe Fred's going in the lab and checking something out. And Susan's doing a production scale up. And Fran is doing some market research and somebody's doing customer interviews. Then finally, we put together a management report. So let me just take a breath here for a second. Any questions so far on that methodology that I've just shared with you? Everybody okay so far? And if you don't get at that discovery interview quick start card, let me just show you one other place that you might find helpful. If you go out to our main website, and under services, you'll see Minesweeper Project De-risking. And there's a little video here that describes the process more. It's less than 5 minutes. And instead of scaring people away on our website, I just show 4 major steps. Generate assumptions, which also includes the consumption chain. Rate assumptions, which also includes individual and group rating. And then investigate the assumptions, which is the checkpoint plan. And then there's a report. So if you ever want to look at just kind of a condensed version of this, you can. And in a little bit, I'm going to show you this management report. You can download that right here, Derisking report. So again, to get to this, you go out to theaiminstitute.com, services, Minesweeper. There's a video, and there's a couple places, sample of the report and so forth. Also, if you ever want to come to a 3-hour workshop, you can come over here, click on this, and we're taking August off, but in September, we're going to have another virtual 3-hour workshop where we go through a simulation for a pretend project and show you in detail what this all looks like. Okay, so that's it on the methodology. Now, let's talk a little bit more about what the benefits are. So I'm going to open up the software, and we'll just see what the benefits are when you're communicating to management. So I'm going to open up this demo after the project, and imagine we did all these steps up here. So the team, before they have their meeting with management, they're going to want to review their progress to see how they're doing. So they're going to click this blue play button right here. And notice in the upper left here, you see the column chart. It's showing the number of yellow and red assumptions. These are things that are caution and danger. And the team has been driving these down. They've been converting things from red and yellow to green. And then over on the chart on the upper right, you can see that the number of external uncertainties on the vertical and the number of internal uncertainties on the horizontal, they're decreasing over time. So we're coming in closer to the origin. Let me play that one more time. Notice there's a lot of red and yellow external assumptions and a lot of internal assumptions. And then as time goes on, it's very common for teams to drive out the external assumptions first, because it's usually fairly cheap and easy to interview GLG, buy a market study, interview customers. The internal assumptions, can we do this in the lab? Can we scale it up? Those often take a little more time and money. And then down below, the team can review all of their certainty matrices. This is near the end of the project, so most of these are now green. So that's the first thing the team does is they check it out themselves. And then it's time to make some management reports. So they hit this and they have an edit pencil in here. And we give them suggestions on what to put in the summary. And there's some drop-down menus here on fit with their existing capabilities. They can put in different timelines for the charts, put in the status. We have these things called landmines. Normally you're moving from red to yellow to green, you're driving out uncertainty and you're finding out, yeah, the market is big enough. Yeah, industry regulations won't block us. Yeah, the patents won't block us. But what if you found out that, oops, patents will block us? Then we put in possible landmines. If it's 25 to 75% probability of the wrong answer, 75% probability and up, we'll put in a probable landmine. And if we find it is going to kill the project, we put in a confirmed landmine. And you never want to surprise management with these. You want to let them see these coming. And then our recommendation, maintain, yada, yada, yada. So let's say the final of this. And then what you can do, it's a good idea, I think, to send a report to management on a regular basis, even if you're not meeting with them regularly. So click the PDF, and then this is that report you can download. You'll be able to send them a PDF that describes what your progress has been. And if you're going to have a meeting with them, send this about a week ahead of the meeting. So let me go ahead and blow this up a little bit. There's your overview of how you're doing. There's a number of external and internal uncertainties, assumptions. And then here's how we're driving down the danger and caution assumptions. And we're moving in toward the origin here, reducing the number of external and internal assumptions. This team's got 3 possible landmines and 1 probable landmine, but apparently they think they can get the job done because they're recommending an accelerate approach. So this is the thing you want to get to management on a regular basis, even if you're not meeting with them. Now, let me show you the PowerPoint, and then I'll pause again. We'll see if you have any questions. So the PowerPoint should look pretty familiar. It's basically the same 6 sections that we saw earlier. Let me enable editing, but you'll be able to see this a little bit better. Now, obviously, you can add in other charts and so forth here if you want to, but you can explain your offering, the market. This would obviously be filled in for your project. That's the overview. Then you show them how you're dealing with these assumptions, external and internal, what's left. You're showing them how you're driving these down little by little, and then how you're moving in toward the origin, describing any landmines you see, and also what you're going to do next, what the status is and what's coming. And then here is your recommendation, what you'll be doing next, your recommendation for the project. Do you need anything from management at this time? When will you need a decision from management, and so forth? Now, what some teams will do, they'll go ahead and they'll use this, but they'll also come back to the software and they'll create a PowerPoint. And here, if you want to supplement that management report, you could pick any point in time and you could export some more PowerPoint slides. I like to make this my appendix. So I like to add this slide deck in at the end of my main presentation. And then if management says, let's get through these. If management says, well, what about, let's see, 9. What about those robotic hands? You're using a lot of robots on the packaging. Are they going to slip? Well, that's actually one of our assumptions, that they won't slip. And here's where we're at on that one. And so you can dive into any of the assumptions. Now, this gives management a lot of confidence that you got your act together because you have all these listed and you can go into those. So, questions at all on anything that I've covered so far with the how-to and the presentations we're going to make to management? Anybody? All right. Well, just flag me down if anything comes up. And let me just share a little bit more, and then we're going to wrap up for today here. Let me go back to my slide deck and share with you why I think this is so powerful to be doing this. It's all about, this next part's all about the interface with management. So there's a report. As I said, let's say you're going to have a review with management once a quarter. Well, I would still send them the 2-page PDF once a month just to keep them up to date. It just takes a couple clicks, and then they're really on top of it. And then, make your presentation once a quarter. Now, what you want to do when you're meeting with management is let them know in the early stage you are in the learning phase. You are not in the decision phase. That's going to come later, or the investment phase. See, what happens to a lot of these projects in our experience is, and you can ask yourself this question, if you've got a lot of these high stakes projects, are people assigning net present values? Are they assigning probabilities of success and doing risk profiles? I bet they are. And the reason they're doing it is because they need some way of communicating with management. But if you look up the definition of risk in the dictionary, it says you have to be able to assign a probability of a negative event. Now, in the early phases of a project, you just don't know enough yet to assign a probability of a negative event. All you can say is we are learning. We are driving out uncertainty. Now, later, when it comes time to make investments, then you need a discounted cash flow, internal rate of return, modified internal rate of return, net present value, probability of success. Sure, do all of that stuff when you're ready to make an investment. But the problem is a lot of companies, they try to assign that level of risk very early on in a project. And when they do it, one of two things too often happens. The one is the team goes, well, we told management there's a 70% probability of success and we got to make this thing work. Doesn't look too good, but we'll put our heads down and we'll keep going. and they don't want to bring the bad news to management, because who wants to be the one who says, oh, yeah, we had to kill it. Well, management says, I thought you said it was 70% probability. And hey, we're counting on an expected value of $10 million of net present value. Now it's not there. That's not a fun conversation. So the first thing is people hang on to projects way too long if they assign risk and probabilities and financial metrics. The second thing that happens is they get scared. They go, oh man, I don't want to go into that market. I don't want to try that technology. It looks risky, man. That's up in the upper quadrant, up in the suicide quadrant there. I don't want to go there with Mr. Ansoff. So I'm going to go do safe stuff. I'm going to stick to my knitting over here back in the core. Well, yeah, but you could have done some quick experiments and start up a team and maybe learn it's going to be a fantastic market if we can get rid of the uncertainty cheaply and early. And that's really what this process is about. So here's what we want to do is we want to change the dynamics of these project reviews. So we don't want to do this. Have you ever been in one of these meetings where the team presents to the C-level or the business team or even the board of directors? And we're going to create a new polymer that does this. And by the third slide, all the eyes glaze over except the chief technology officer is maybe hanging in there. But everybody else is doing email because they don't even understand this project. And what you want to do is separate your success from the team's success. You need to be able to say, hey, listen, I don't know if this is going to be a successful project or not. But what I can tell you is we will drive this as fast as we can from uncertainty to certainty. And if it's going to die, if it needs to die, we're going to find out as soon as we possibly can and let you know and move on to something else. So we're not going to play around with this thing. So the other thing we want to do is differentiate our updates from our decisions. Hey, boss, we're not asking for any decisions today. We're driving out uncertainties. We're doing it at a pretty fast clip. It's not costing a lot of money, and we'll have more for you, but we're not done. I just want to give you an update. Now, this thing is really important. So I remember once I was responsible for putting our first factory in Asia for our company. And for a year, I would have meetings Thursday night, Thursday morning, Thursday night, Thursday morning, back and forth with our team over in Shanghai. And then I would give periodic reviews to our president. And I remember one of those reviews, he goes, Adams, what about this? And I took my Gantt chart and I turned it around. I slid it across the highly polished mahogany table and said, oh, we got that handled on line 72, sir. Okay, Adams, what about that? And I said, well, we got that on line 138, sir. We're moving along pretty good here. Nice work, Adams. And then he went on and beat up somebody else. And I said to myself, oh, I get it. He doesn't have to understand our Gantt chart. He just has to know that we've got one and we're using it. Now, a Gantt chart is great for managing risk, resources, and timelines. Wouldn't it be cool if we had a Gantt chart for risk? And that's exactly what we're doing with this methodology. We're showing them we're managing risk as well. When this happens, we've seen this observed for several years have been doing this. The executive team tends to join the team and judges it less. So you get less micromanaging, less second guessing, and management's more patient. Maybe before the project was killed maybe in 2.5 years, but if they just would have had patience for 3 years, you would have seen the light of day and the project would have been a big success. So instead of them saying, oh, I got this big black box I don't understand, with the team saying, trust me, you'll love it. Instead of that, you bring them along, you show them exactly what you're doing. All right, well, that's all I have got for how to handle high stakes projects. Any questions anybody has before we open it up for general comments? I might tell a quick story here too while you're thinking about that. So we were working with a company in the Middle East, and they used our methodology on a dozen projects. And we packed 12 reviews in one day. Every team just had like 20 or 30 minutes, but they used this methodology that I'm showing you here. And I was so impressed with the top executive. He was asking great questions. He was patient. He followed along. And I was complimenting him to the CTO and some other people. And somebody kind of chuckled and laughed and said, huh, he said, we didn't even recognize him. Normally he beats us up. We're black and blue after these meetings because he's just merciless with us. But the difference was this time he could understand what was going on instead of saying, is it this? Is it that? What about that? Kind of like a big shell game. It was all out there for him to see and understand. So he was much, much easier to work with. And as I say, he tended to join the team. All right. Well, Scott, can you think of anything that I left off before we check with folks one last time?
I can't. I think we're good.
Okay. Anybody, any last questions? If you have a project that's kind of big and scary and you're thinking about this, let us know. Drop one of us a note. We'll be glad to send you a guest pass to our next 3-hour de-risking on whatever that was in September. Glad to have you come and check it out in more detail, and we can talk about your project if you have it. But think about it this way. If you've got a project, if you decide you like the approach, the first time you end up doing it, we would recommend you get one of us to facilitate your project. And then there's going to be some software charges. After the first project, it's like $30 a month to keep the software going. But the first project will probably be about $10,000. But think about this. If you've got 3, 4, 5 people on that project full time, you're probably burning about $1 million a year on their project. And so that's about burn rate of about, what, $20,000 a week. So it may be worth your while to kind of really get it lined out in the beginning. All right, great. Well, listen, everybody, thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you at another Monday Masterclass. Have a good rest of the week, okay? Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.